Hi, welcome to this episode of Ask Amy. Today, we're focusing on divorce. Not something that I've ever really done a story on in all my years of consumer reporting, but I wanted to talk about it today because we've got a special guest, Trey Yates. You're a board-certified family law attorney practicing here in Houston.
Yes.
Thanks for coming in. It was actually what you do, this whole thing called The Guide to Good Divorce, which is what got my attention. You hold seminars and sessions. I mean, what would you call them? Seminars?
Yeah, they're educational seminars for women. Yes. Back in 2011, I put together a separate 501c3 because in my own private practice, I saw that the traditional application to women going through divorce was just not meeting their needs. So I thought, what can I do to give back to this community that's been so generous with me? And I came up with this idea.
The Guide to Good Divorce. I kind of laughed because I was like, is there such thing as a good divorce? It doesn't feel good to most people going through it. But yours is, like you said, mostly for the women in the relationship.
Right, and we're not saying that divorce is good, Amy. What we're saying is that the mindset that you bring to the process can be transformative. Because a lot of times I have successful women that own their own companies, they're successful in their business, but this is something that can send terror into anyone's life. Because suddenly do you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs from college psychology?
Right.
Maslow said that if you feel secure in terms of housing and safety and food and stuff like that, then you can start to develop yourself, in terms of evolution and spirituality. And so what happens with divorce for a lot of ladies is that suddenly that first rung is yanked out from underneath them, right? And even if they're the ones that initiate the divorce, life is going to change. And when you have children, it changes not only for you, but also for your kids.
Right.
And so what we believe at the Guide to Good Divorce, and what we talk about in these seminars, is that if you can look at it as a process and be focused and engaged, then it can be a path to a more positive, transformative life.
Got it.
And we have ladies that have been through the process, come back at our seminars and tell their own stories.
Oh,
and it's very inspirational because the ladies that are there, they get to see that they're going to get through this and their life may be better. It's going to be different.
Yeah.
But it may be better.
It's really interesting because I think that anybody going through divorce, you were saying, there are all these misconceptions from just things that you hear in normal conversation about like, oh, this, or just ask for that, or you'll get this. And a lot of these things you don't know until you may be going through a divorce, that those are simply not true.
Absolutely.
But there was no real place for you to ask these questions or learn this information, or maybe you didn't have a need to before.
Or the conduit for information is your hairdresser or your mother or your sister or your best girlfriend that may have been through the experience themselves. Not really the best place to get advice for a legal proceeding.
Right.
And this is also kind of a shocker for a lot of people, and that is a divorce is a lawsuit. You're in the highest trial court in the state of Texas, okay? Sure, most of our divorces end because people get together and they put together an agreement in mediation or informal settlement conferences. But the truth of the matter is you always have to be thinking about if you and your spouse can't come to an agreement, what would a judge do? And so the rules of evidence and procedure, the family code itself is this big book. And the other thing is it changes every 2 years when our legislatures go back to Austin. So you want to be working with professionals that have a focus on the ever-changing landscape.
Right.
Does it make sense?
It does. It does. Do you know what percentage of, so it is a lawsuit, what percentage of those lawsuits end with the couple going to mediation versus them having to go to court and have a judge?
Yeah, I think about 80% of cases, divorce cases, end because people get together and confer, put together an agreed parenting plan for their children, or make a reasonable financial decision in terms of how to divide up the stuff. All right? But that other 20% will have to turn it over to a total stranger, a judge who comes to the bench, as well-meaning as they are with their own life experience, right? And they will take the law, apply it to the particular facts of your marriage to come up with a solution for you. And honestly, the last thing I would ever want to do is turn over the welfare of my children to a total stranger.
That's
right?
an interesting way to look at it. Exactly. Yeah. You gave a really high number. You always hear, half of all marriages end in divorce. In Harris County, it's even more than that.
It's about 60%.
Wow.
Right, and rising. I joke that if you didn't like your spouse before you went into COVID lockdown, that probably pushed you over the edge to some degree. So we're swamped down at the courthouse. And when you have a family going through divorce or going through life with a child with special needs, that percentage of 60 jumps to 85%.
Wow.
Yeah, because there's such additional stressors on couples, partners, when they have a child with special needs.
The other interesting thing you mentioned about Harris County is that there's a whole new crop of family law judges.
That's right. When I started my career 40 years ago, they were all white males. And now they're all female, and mostly professionals that come from the world of child support or special needs, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a whole new dynamic. There's a whole new feeling, down at the courthouse. But there are also a lot of them working mothers. And so, again, you got to know everything you can about the judge that may decide the fate of your children or yourself.
Right. And so you can't always choose the judge, but that's where obviously
you don't. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
You can't ever choose the judge. You never choose the judge.
Right. It's a roulette system. I have my doubts about some of that. But anyway, you won't know until you file.
Yeah.
But if you find yourself in the process, once a court is affixed to your divorce proceeding, do what you can to find out about that judge. And, we live in a world of social media. And so judges are out there. Right, on social media. And it does make a difference because they're going to bring their own life perspective when they're listening to your marriage.
And so that's something that you tell your clients and people who come to these seminars.
Absolutely.
Background on the judge.
Do everything you can. Yeah, that's part of the idea about being engaged in the process.
Right. So for each part of our show today, we want to talk about some of the different aspects that you cover in the Guide to Good Divorce. Specifically child support, financial planning. But before we start that, we're about to take a break. What would you say is the most common mistake that women make when they realize that they're going to file for divorce, or when they do?
The complexity of the process, because a lot of people assume that a divorce is a divorce. It's easy peasy. It's not very complicated. And they come in with this idea that it's a simple process. Nothing could be further from the truth, okay? And so I think that's one of the big mistakes. The other one is assuming that you are, quote unquote, entitled to something in the process, all right? Sure, there are presumptions in the statute that give you some relief, but nothing is free anymore. And so you have to be engaged.
All right. Okay, so that leaves us in a good spot to take a break. When we come back, I want you to talk a little bit about financial planning and what people need to know. So we will be right back. Welcome back to Ask Amy. Today our topic is divorce. Our guest is Trey Yates. So we talked a little bit about the Guide to Good Divorce, what caught my attention about these services that you provide. Let's talk about financial planning, because a large part, if people sign up for the Guide to Good Divorce, it's like a seminar, 9 to 2 p.m.
Right.
But a big part of it is on financial planning.
It is. And we have experts in the field. There's actually a certification for divorce financial planning. And so I know when to stay in my lane as a lawyer and when to turn it over to other experts. So one of the things that is critically important is you got to know what you have and you got to know what you owe.
Right.
We can't just talk about what we have. We also have to talk about any debt structure, taxes that are owed. And in a lot of the ladies that I work with, for whatever reason, they don't know everything that they should know about their finances.
Right. You hear this a lot.
Yeah, some of my clients are chief financial officers of corporations. But usually in a marriage, someone has been the bill payer, someone's been the one who's managed the finances, the one who's dealt with the CPA and putting the tax returns together. So one of the things that you want to do, whether you're planning for divorce or whether you've been surprised by a divorce, is get organized. Find the statements. You want to find the closing statement for the purchase of the marital residence, because the money that you brought to purchase it could change the characterization of the property itself, right? Because,
what do you mean by that?
well, there's a thing called separate property, and then there's a thing called community property. And so in Texas, even though you and I bought our marital residence during the marriage, you had an inheritance, say of 20 grand, and you brought that money to closing for us to purchase the house. Well, guess what? The house may be your separate property, not community property.
Okay.
So again, you want to make sure that you have the supporting documentation to be able to show the court, show the other lawyer in mediation that there's a difference there, okay? So we got to know what we have and what we owe. And one of the other things is we got to know that not every dollar in the divorce process is the same. For example, cash equity in a home may be worth more than that reciprocal dollar in a 401k. Why? Because if you sell the house, other than cost of sale, then that's cash that Amy can go out and buy a new home with.
Right.
If you have to use the money in the 401k, the percentage that you're awarded, to pay for reasonable and necessary living expenses, you're going to lose 25%
To taxes.
just because of taxes and penalties, right?
Okay.
So when you're negotiating your settlement, you don't want to just be dazzled by the amounts. You want to do the analysis as to what does it get me.
Right.
And the other thing is, like, it's my job to get you $1 million in the settlement. A divorce financial planner or financial analyst will tell you what does that buy you in terms of a life stream, an income stream. And that can be very important, especially if you're the primary caretaker of children or you have children with special needs. Another misconception that I hear about is that he'll have to pay me support after we're divorced.
And and so we hear about this a lot in Texas. There is no alimony in Texas.
Only by agreement,
Okay.
meaning that he or you can contractually agree to support your spouse after you no longer have a legal duty to do so. When we're married, Texas law says that I have to support you and you have to support me.
Okay.
But when we're divorced, that legal tie is no longer there. It's dissolved.
Right.
And
some
with
states have it where it could be ordered just like child support?
Absolutely. Like California, you can have lifetime alimony.
Wow.
Yeah, but we're in the South, and so that doesn't happen very often, right? So unless it's by agreement, then we do have a thing called spousal maintenance.
What's that?
Well, spousal maintenance means that you got to show that but for an income stream from the person who no longer now has a duty to support you, that if you don't get that money, you're basically going to be living under a bridge. It's a very punitive, needs-based statute. So before you start talking about how much and how long, you got to examine with your lawyer as to whether or not you even qualify. And one of the other punitive parts of the statute is that if you get 50% or 60% of the community estate, that pretty much disqualifies you from then also getting spousal maintenance, because the way the statute is written, it says that, look, Amy, you say you don't have an income stream, but you got that $1 million in your divorce.
Sell
so
it
you're
if
going to
you
have
want.
to start selling it and liquidating it, okay? And that, that can be used to pay for those reasonable and necessary living expenses, and that's why most ladies don't qualify.
Got it. And a lot of people, like, again, you go back to the hairdresser that you mentioned in the first segment, you hear, oh, well, my friend gets this amount every month, and it's like, you have no idea. A judge is never going to say that has to happen.
Correct. Well, correct. One of the other misconceptions is that, let's say someone's at fault, okay? Meaning that, shall we say, they misbehaved in the marriage and had an affair. I hear this all the time. Well, he cheated on me, and so therefore I want support. Unfortunately, cheating on you doesn't really qualify. Okay?
That doesn't change
it doesn't change the formulary in the statute.
Okay.
Right. So you want to be careful about developing those fault grounds.
Right.
Because Texas, most of our divorces are based on what we call irreconcilable differences, or we just don't get along.
Yeah. And so then the things that we need to do is first figure out what we have. So for example, we have this home that we purchased together. This is how much it's worth, but this is how much we owe.
Correct.
How much do we owe in other debt that we owe together? And then how much does each spouse maybe have in a 401k or any sort of savings?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, and the other thing I hear a lot too is the credit card's in his name, so I'm not liable.
Not true?
Not true.
Okay.
Not true, because when the creditor extended the benefit of using credit and you were married, they thought they had two sources on which to collect from.
Right.
So even if some of the debt is in the other spouse's name, just be aware of the fact that potentially you're also liable for that debt.
Okay. That is very good to know. And then also, you said that there's really nothing, we always assume that we're going to split everything 50-50.
Right.
Is that a wrong assumption?
That is a wrong assumption, because nowhere in the statute does it say that it's a 50-50 split. It says that the court, considering the facts of your marriage, and that means everything, who's the primary caretaker, whether or not you've been the superior wage earner, what property you have, what you owe, what your inheritance might be, has to then take all of that and make a just and right division.
Okay.
That's a pretty loose, there's not very defined.
Right.
Okay? And so when you go into it, you want to start asking your lawyer whether or not you think the facts of my marriage would warrant the court in awarding me more than 50%. Now, don't get hung up on on percentages until you know what each percentage point is worth.
Right.
A lot of my ladies say that their girlfriend got 60% and they have to get 60%. But they don't know what those percentage points are worth. So you don't want to just be paying a high-priced lawyer to go and advocate for that delta when you don't know what you might get.
And what you mean by that delta, just for people who don't understand, so say you add up everything that you own together, all of your assets, how much money you have, you add up everything that you own, and then you say, okay, so here's how much we really have after you take away the liabilities.
Right.
And then you split it. And then if I'm paying somebody $400 an hour to try to get me more of that percentage and it only ends up being $15,000, I probably wasted my money.
Right.
So that's interesting, because in those cases, your attorney is there to represent you, but you're almost feeling like, I need to figure this out on my own, because of course the attorney is going to say, sure, I'll help you do that.
Well,
right?
to a degree. Most lawyers really are decent people, especially divorce lawyers. I'm a bit prejudiced because I've been doing it for 40 years. But I'm saying that, this is what the philosophy of the Guide to Good Divorce is about, and that is get information, stay engaged, ask questions. This is not a time to be passive and let things happen to you.
Right.
Even if you feel powerless, you really aren't.
Right. And never going to a mediation or showing up in court because your ex-spouse or soon-to-be ex-spouse has said, this is all going to be amicable.
Oh, goodness. That should set off a lot of red flags. If he comes to you and says, let's share a lawyer, first of all, it's unethical for the lawyer to do that. That should be a big warning sign, okay? Or let's go to mediation because the lawyers charge too much and we're going to lose all this money in attorney's fees. Don't go to mediation if you're not prepared. That's the message.
Yeah.
Don't go unless you are prepared.
Because I think some people hear like, oh, this is a time where we can lay it all out there, we can both talk, we're going to come to this agreement.
Right.
But it can still be quite contentious.
Absolutely. And why wouldn't you want to negotiate from a position of knowledge and strength, right?
Right.
So don't go into it like a deer in the headlights. The system is rigged so that you have to show your hand. Before I play it, I got to show you everything that I have, and you got to show me everything that you had. So you are entitled to all of those financial documents, whether he's taken them out of the house and hid them or not. There are ways of getting them back. So, and that's what lawyers help you do. They help you organize and get access to those documents if you can't retrieve them yourself.
Okay. All right. When we come back, we're talking about probably the biggest thing people want to know about in divorces is child support. And you specialize in divorces with kids with special needs. So we're going to touch on that as well. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this episode of Ask Amy. We're talking about divorce. Trey Yates, certified family lawyer, talk to us about child support.
Yes.
This is probably one of the biggest sticking points, and this is our shortest segment right now, so I want you to just go and tell us about all the things it doesn't cover that you're thinking might be provided for your children.
Yeah, absolutely. So the statute is written where the obligor is what we call it, the person who's paying the child support, can only be ordered to pay periodic ongoing child support. And it's based upon an artificial formula, all right? So in other words, let's say, for example, that I make $15,000 net a month. We have a child, okay? It's time to get divorced. You get custody, I pay child support. There is a percentage, one child is worth, don't you love that, 20%. But it's not of the total 15,000, it's only up to 9,200, which means the maximum amount of child support the court could order that I pay you is $1,840 a month.
Okay.
Now you do the math and look at your budget in this town, that doesn't go very far, right? And so child support, and then medical child support, meaning that someone has to pay for the premium for our child to have health care coverage.
Right.
If you are, then I reimburse you. If I do it, then I get that taken off before that percentage is applied.
Okay.
All right? What the court cannot order is the payment of private school tuition, summer camps, extracurricular activities, our daughter's wedding, college. There is no statutory authority for a court to order that you pay for our children's college.
If your kids are in private school, when you're divorced, you take that $1,840 and you do what you want with it.
Or if you can, then of course, above that child support, an agreement should be entered into for the apportionment of the payment of private school, and then of course all of the incidentals that go with having our children in private school, right?
Right.
Car payments, all of the stuff that normally you would think a parent would feel good about paying for, sometimes that generosity just doesn't show up. And when you go to mediation, you always want to think about risk assessment. So you want all of this money, and his team is saying, well, but I'm only exposed to pay this small amount.
Yeah.
So how do you bridge that gap, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of walk people through that. I want to save enough time for your specialty. You specialize, and I would imagine there's not a lot of attorneys out there who do that.
They're not.
Divorces with kids with special
needs, yes.
Why is it so different?
It's so different because the components are so different when you have a child with special needs, okay? First of all, we don't offer an awful lot of benefits in the state. And so those that are provided, you have a 10 to 15 year waiting list for Medicaid waiver services. Most private pay is exorbitant for facilities, residential or day hab. And so the amount of child support has to be factoring in those additional special things that parents with special needs have to face, all right? So the statute, there's a whole different part of the code that talks about child support for children with special needs. First is minors, and then also as adults. Because unlike anything else in the statute, if there is a finding that your child has a special need that renders them incapable of self-support when they emancipate, then someone has to pay child support indefinitely.
Okay.
The method in which they pay it is also very important so that the child isn't disqualified from SSI or Medicaid, which is through what we call a first-party Medicaid payback trust. So you can get pretty complicated, all right? And so a lot of lawyers really just don't do this work, so you want to be working with someone, if you do have a child with special needs, that is well-versed in the world of guardianship and family court, because the two really don't like to talk to each other, though they should.
Right.
Because sometimes you can have a guardianship proceeding, and sometimes you can also have a child support proceeding in family court.
Okay.
Make sense?
That does make sense. And we are out of time, but you did mention that one thing that families with special needs need to do is a Medicaid waiver list. They need to get them on
They need to get them
list.
on as soon as you know that your child could possibly have a disability that will render them incapable of self-support, get them on the Medicaid waiver list. There are people in this town that will help you with benefit applications.
Okay. All right. Trey Yates, thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
coming
Amy.
in. This was very
It's been great.
informative. We will put all of the information that you need and link you to the Guide to Good Divorce and Trey Yates in the show notes for this episode. Thanks so much and have a great day.